ProWrestlingTees.com/616entertainment is the only place to grab an official t-shirt for the channel. There's a million of them. Check them out. This video is also brought to you in part by the Patreon producers, without whom content like this would not be possible. Oh goodness, Dan-Dans. Welcome to Mortal Kombat Monday. My name is Ian, and this week on the show we are continuing the Mortal Kombat novel written by Jeff Rovin. Now, if you are unaware, this is probably the 5th installment of me reading this thing. It has taken way longer for me to finish this thing than I initially intended, and here's why. Number one, this thing sucks. It's a terribly written book. Number two, the last couple episodes reading this thing didn't do that well. So I tend to push stuff that I think is not going to do that well off into the distance for things that I think are going to be, have a better chance of catching fire, you know? But I promised we're going to finish this fucking book, and we're going to do that now. Now, once again, between the 3rd and 4th installments of me reading this, over a year passed. And between the 4th and 5th, this is now the 5th, I think, let's see, May, June, July, August, September, 4 months has passed again. So I don't remember what any of the voices that I did for these characters are, so we have to freeball it. But I've gotten a lot of nice comments about reading this book from those of you who know that it sucks and you're having fun with this. And I've actually had several, blind subscribers reach out as well and say that they're having a really good time with these readings because they get to live vicariously through this piece of shit, and that's fun as hell too. So what it comes down to is I'm glad I can provide entertainment. This is Mortal Kombat Monday. Let's get into this book. This is chapter goddamn 19. Here we go. And remember, I read this, and when it sucks, we're going to go off on a tangent. We're going to go off on a side deal. I'm going to talk about it as well. And I'm going to give you my commentary as I read. Here we go, man. Chapter 19. We're on page 153 if you want to read along. Yong Park was drifting in utter blackness, comfortable and dreamy, and dead. He wasn't sure whether he was face down or upright. In the dark, there was no direction. Only a sense that he was moving somewhere. I'm getting Snapchats. Whatever he was made of, whether corporeal or spirit, he couldn't see it. He felt as though he were part of the blackness in which he moved. The toll taker tried to collect his thoughts. The memory of the pain came back quickly and easily. The searing, unbearable torment of the pole with its knife as it cut slowly from his inside thigh upward, up to his belly, then to his ribs, before it stopped. Why hadn't he died then, right away? Yong Park had always had time to think as he sat in a... What? Yong Park had always had time to think. There should be a comma there. Anyway. Yong Park had always had time to think as he sat in his little booth by the centuries-old canal. He couldn't read, and there was nothing else to do as he raised and lowered the pike and collected tolls from merchants and fishermen and travelers using the waterways, monies which he turned over to the local government in exchange for his modest wage of 5 yuan a week. Yuan? Y-U-A-N? Is that a fictional currency or is that a real thing and I'm just uncultured? Someone let me know. It wasn't an exciting or especially rewarding life, but that was exactly what he wanted. He had turned his back on the ways of the ninjas so that he could take a wife and have a family. Now and then, his thoughts were about death. When he was a young ninja, full of vigor and trained to think of only honor, he never contemplated dying. But later, who wouldn't think of it as he approached 30, past middle age in a land where very few people lived to be 60? Good lord. Park had always imagined that death would come quicker when he's one's blood... What? Okay, this one's my fault. I fucked up there. I'm not going to blame the book. Park had always imagined that death would come quicker when one's blood was spilled, that a wounded man would lose consciousness and feel very little. Even as a ninja, he was told that the body went into a shocked state when it suffered a serious wound, a state that prevented it from feeling the full extent of the pain. That was wrong, he had to admit. Very, very, very wrong. As the knife had scored the flesh inside his thigh and the blood had begun to flow, and he'd heard the screams of his family, Park had realized that nothing kept one from dying like intense pain. To the contrary, it brought one to life, from the burning agony of the wound itself, to the raw insides of one's screaming throat, to the hate in one's heart for the one who was doing the killing. Sub-Zero. That was... Take two. That was what the men who held him down to the floor of the toll booth had been called. It says the men, not the man. That was what the men who held him down on the floor of the toll booth had been called. So several people are being called Sub-Zero. Okay. Anyway. That was the name of the monster who had dragged his wife and son from their hut nearby to watch his flesh ravaged and his blood spilled, to see his intestines and stomach exposed, still alive, as he squirmed and shrieked and died. And now he was drifting. He knew he had died because he had stopped breathing. He had felt the pain envelop him and squeeze him and then leave him, though that wasn't what had killed him. He had been thrown face down in the canal and he drowned. It was almost comical, as he thought about it now, to be cut nearly in half with a sword, his flesh and muscles shredded, his blood and viscera spilling everywhere, yet to actually die by drowning. If he had been alive, he'd have laughed. That, and if he hadn't thought of his poor wife and teenage son screaming and crying as they watched. At least they were still alive, but how would this scar them? Take two. But how this would scar them for the rest of their lives. Especially his sweet and wonderful son Sui, T-S-U-I, Sui, an artist who was so sensitive, so loving. Suddenly Yong Park stopped drifting. He felt weightless, unable to lift even his own self, and then suddenly he was no longer alone. The blackness was still everywhere, but in his mind he saw a creature unlike any he'd ever seen or dreamed of. It had the musculature of a torso, the head of a wolf, the lower body of a mountain cat, the shell of a beetle, the forelegs of a frog, the hind legs of a bear, and the tail of a scorpion. And he heard a voice. "Yong Park." "Yes," he said. "I am you, god of the waterways and tunnels. I know of you. My grandmother used to tell me stories, but you are a myth. Behind every myth there is some truth, and behind every truth there is more myth. I am real, Yong Park." "Why are you here?" Yong asked. "Why am I here?" "You are in the limbo between life and death," said the demigod, "but it is not yet time for you to pass over. There is work you must do." "What work?" Yu's canine eyes grew angry and his maw pulled back to expose long, white teeth. "The man who took your life defiled the canal. Not just your death, Yong Park, but in the manner of it. He tore away parts of souls of your wife and son, left them to wander my waterway forever. They will not know peace until we have been avenged." Upon hearing those words, Yong Park's spirit, for how he realized now that what the fuck? This is also my fault. Upon hearing those words, Yong Park's spirit, for he realized now that that was what he was, felt some of his old ninja fire return. "I want you to go back," Yu said. "I want you to return and bring me the soul of the man who slew you." "How will I do that?" Park asked. "My body was destroyed." The demigod leaned forward. "You have a son." "I do," said Park. "But he is an artist. He has no training in these matters, no skills. He is young and strong and has the will to avenge you. With your spirit inside of him, he will be able to move through space in a moment. His weapons will be the hooks and barbs of those who live on the waterways. Our help will become an artist of death." "No," Park said. "Sui and my wife have suffered enough. If he leaves, she will have no one. She will not have no one," the demigod said as he evaporated into the darkness. "She will have you both." And then Yong Park felt himself drifting again, slowly at first, and then faster as he was sent from limbo back to the world of the living, to a place he knew well. That's chapter 19, Dan Dans. Now, I stumbled a number of times, and I will take the credit for those stumbles and not blame the book. But what the fuck are we talking about here? Who is Young Park? Why are several people called Sub-Zero? That's this novel, man. Chapter 20. He watched from the top of a tree, waiting for the moment to reveal himself to them. A low fog began crawling along the grasses of the field as Kano, Schneider, Senni, and Sonya, Gilly, Blade, followed the glow of Kung Lao's flashlight. Did we establish that Sonya's called Gilly in this book? I don't fucking remember that. Don't get too far ahead, Kano yelled. You hear me, Sky Pilot? Say, Chief, Schneider said. Who should Schneider be? We need to give a voice to Schneider. Say, Chief, Schneider said. Don't you think you ought to show the man some respect? I mean, he is a high priest and all. A priest of what? Kano snickered. The Order of Light. What's that, like religion light? Don't fill you up. What does don't fill you up mean? I don't know. He jogged up to Kung Lao and poked him in the side with his knife. Tell me, King Kung, exactly what is the Order of Light? Are you asking to mock me, or because you wish to learn? What's it to you? Kano said. If you don't tell me, I'll radio back and have Moriarty turn Chin's head into Swiss cheese. That was hard to read. Now I'm coughing, laughing, and hiccuping at the same time. Kung Lao shook his head. The strong always persecute the faithful, and always lose in the end. But I'll tell you, Kano, the Order of Light is a faith some 20 centuries old. That's 2,000 years, Schneider shouted. Thanks, Einstein, Kano shouted back. Kung Lao continued. We believe that the basic lights are knowledge, love, and art, and that there are many lesser lights, including experience, sacrifice, charity, labor, and denial. We teach that these lights contribute to a good and holy soul, and that such a soul can withstand all evil. So you're saying, Kano said, that if Schneid's here, put a gun to your back and pull the trigger, bullets will turn your heart to paste and you won't die? Of course I'll die, Kung Lao said. But death does not change the quality of life that has ended, nor the legacy... I'm having trouble here. I'm just having trouble reading. It's one of those fucking nights, you know? You guys don't know this, but when I fucking write scripts for the history of Halloween or whatever, and I record them, I fuck up all the time. I just edit it out. But for this audiobook, we're not editing shit. So when I fuck up, it's just gonna stay there forever. It's immortal. We're gonna take that Kung Lao line again. But the Order of Light is not so much concerned with the we're gonna... I went too far. Here we go. Of course I'll die, Kung Lao said. But death does not change the quality of the life that has ended, nor the legacy I will have left behind. But you'd still be deader than Abe Lincoln. Yes, Kung Lao agreed. But the Order of Light is not so much concerned with the individual life. Rather, we are interested in the stream of lives, the great parade of human souls that are a part of the vast soul of the god Pan Ku. We believe that if these souls are all made virtuous, perhaps humanity as a whole can approach the greatness that was once manifested in this seminal god. Jeez, Kano said. I'm sorry I asked. And I am sorry you didn't hear, Kung Lao said. Kano fell back and walked beside Schneider. That guy just dissed me. I think you dissed yourself, Schneider said. But what do I know? He tapped the side of his head with an index finger. Everything in this temple I learned from watching movies. If Charlton Heston or Victor Mature didn't say it, I don't know it. Kano shook... That's the dumbest voice. Kano shook his head and dropped further back. I don't believe this, Gilly, he said, walking beside the woman and Jim Woo. I'm starting to think I'm the only sane one here. That is scary, she said, picking up speed so that she didn't lose sight of Kung Lao as he entered a glen where the fog was shoulder high and thicker than before. Dense clouds rolled in front of the gibbous moon. Wow, okay. The crackling of dried twigs and crisp foliage underfoot was amplified by the fog and darkness. Hey, Lao! Kano yelled as the light became a hazy blur in the thickening fog. "Just remember, lose us, and you lose Chin." "I have promised to lead you to the mountain," Kung Lao said, "and I will keep my word, for as long as I am able." "What's that supposed to mean?" Kano asked. "You'll be able to lead for as long as I..." Kano swallowed the rest of his words as sheet lightning exploded above them. The fog rolled away like smoke caught by a brisk wind. The sky was festive with stars, and the thunder god Raiden stood on the thick limb of a tree, gazing down at the travelers. "You will not take another step," he roared. Kano and the others looked up. "Holy manifestations," Schneider said, his lower jaw hanging loosely. Kano reached over his dumbstruck aide and tore the carbine from around his arm. He raised the barrel toward Raiden and fired. Each bullet was met by a flash of lightning from the tip of the Thunder God's finger and vanished in an explosive burst. Throwing the M44 down in disgust, Kano whipped out his knife and threw it with deadly accuracy. Raiden caught it in front of his chest and it vanished in a magnesium-bright flare. "Enough!" Raiden said, his eyes icy white beneath the brim of his pyramid-shaped straw hat. There was another flash of lightning, and then the Thunder God was standing beside Kano. His fists were at his side, tiny bursts of electricity crackling around each of his fingers. "You have come where you are not welcome," Raiden said. I don't know what my Raiden voice is. "You will leave your..." That's a little too gravelly. How should Raiden sound? What did he sound like before? Was I doing Raiden before? I don't know. "You will leave your weapons here and go." There was another flash then, though it was not like the previous ones. This burst was a deep, deep red, and it didn't so much rip through the sky as push the darkness aside in a fat, jagged shape, and hold it that way for a long moment. Two figures stepped from within, one tall and slender, the other much taller and more powerful. The Thunder God turned to face them, and a smile played about the big mouth of the larger figure. "Raiden!" boomed the tremor-deep voice of Goro. "I have long awaited to meet you." Is that a good Goro? I don't fucking know. Beside Goro, Shang Tsung smiled as he looked at the figure holding the flashlight. How do I do Shang Tsung? What was I doing before? "Kung Lao, I presume," he said. "How much you look like your ancestor, and how fitting, since in just a very few moments, the two of you will be reunited." I think I was doing a different Shang Tsung before, but I don't remember what it was. How deep are we here? We're 17 minutes in, and that's fine, because we got more chapters to cover. It's chapter 21, Dan-Dans. And we're leaving the cool story we were just at to come back to Sui Park. Sui Park was laying on his straw-filled cot, staring through tears at the thatched at the thatched ceiling of the hut. From the corner of his eye, he saw the lights of the village through the open window. All around, people were relaxing after dinner. Those with televisions were watching them. Others were playing checkers or chess. Still others were talking under the stars and smoking pipes or drinking tea. A few close friends and brave souls had come to pay their respects, but not all. The rumors of who had done it and how had kept the fearful at bay. Sui had been Take two. Let me get my shit together here. Sui had been forced to fish his father's body from the water alone, for no one had been brave enough to help. His mother had finally gone to sleep after crying for a day, and now that he no longer had to look after Sui... What? His mother had finally gone to sleep after crying for a day, and now that he no longer had to look after Sui... That's exactly what this says. I'm not fucking this part up. And now that he no longer had to look after Sui, was able to tend to his own needs. That's horrible. I don't even know what he's trying to say here. Look after his own profound sense of loss. What the fuck ever. Why had they done this? He asked himself. He was not unschooled in the ways of the ninja. That goes against what his dad said earlier. His dad told that fucking god that he was totally unskilled. His father had told him about his own past and about the displeasure of his masters when he turned his back on the life of the Shadow Warriors. But that was 20 years before. Why had they come for him now? Because they couldn't find me. Sui sat up. Who's there? The blackness in the room seemed to shift. Light from outside was reflected from the washing basin and radio, from a metal lamp and looking glass, save where a black cloud seemed to move. There, it was only darkness. Don't be afraid, Sui, the voice said. It is your father. The young man shook his head. That's kind of my Kung Lao voice, isn't it? His long, lean jaw went slack, and his clear brown eyes seemed to be swallowed in white. It is impossible. This is more of their work. A trick. It is no trick. The voice came closer, and as the shadow also grew larger, Sui realized that one was coming from the other. He backed against the brick wall of the hut. I have come to ask for your help, the specter of Yong Park said. The demigod Yu has sent me to avenge my death. Through you. No, Sui said. I'm hallucinating from grief. A dark limb reached toward him, and though Sui did not feel what looked like fingers, he felt an icy chill on his forearm. I am no illusion, said Yong, coming closer. I am the eternal soul of Yong Park, immortal yet helpless, for I cannot touch, I cannot hold. The ethereal voice was right beside him now. I cannot kill. For that, my son, I need your body. You want my body? How? To inhabit it for a time, so that my spirit, my skills, can become yours, while your mind and heart remain as they are, virtuous and clean. Forever? Sui asked. Will you stay with me forever? We will become one, Yong Park whispered. Oh, so I guess it should have been, we will become one. But only until the task is complete, and then I will have to go to my rest, and you will return to your life here with your mother. Mother, Sui said, sliding from the bottom of the bed. I must wake her and tell her. A chilly hand came up in front of Sui, stopping him. No, my son. Why not? Mother will want to know that you are what you are, still alive in some way. Not alive, Yong said, nor will she be able to see and hear me. Every soul has its own place, and you has placed me on the plane inhabited by your spirit only. No one else will know that I'm with you. Sui shook his head again. This can't be happening. Shock has cost me my mind. It is happening, said Yong. As Sui looked on, the shadow began to change, and while the legs and chest and head remained black, gold began to materialize where the arms and shoulders would be, across the mouth and cheeks, while flesh appeared on the forehead and around the dark eyes. The fingers took shape and turned gold and reached out toward the young man. You has given me the power of one of his creatures, said the spirit as he entered his son's body. In addition to the skills I bequeath you, my immortal benefactor has given me something special with which to avenge myself. Sui grew cold and numb as his father's ghostly form merged with his own, as his bare hands took on the shape of golden gloves. His head was shrouded in a dark cowl and golden mask, and his legs and torso were covered with a black bodysuit. A sting, Yong said. The coldness left Sui, and he no longer felt afraid. He rose from the bed and looked down at his hands. Yes, he said, running his fingers across the backs of the gauntlets. I feel it in here. He swung toward the window, quickly crouched, aimed his fist toward a tree. Simply by wishing it, he sent a short, barbed shaft flying from the back of his wrist. It whistled through the air, hit the tree, passed through it, and hit an ice bucket on the other side. Sui stood tall. I am ready, father, he said. Ready to let those who wronged you feel my wrath. The wrath of Scorpion. After writing a note telling his mother not to worry about him, Sui left by the window and was swallowed by the night. So we just got our Scorpion origin here for this novel, which is not Hanzo Hisashi, it's Sui Park, who is a boy who is being possessed by the soul of his dead dad, Yong Park. who was sent on a mission by a bear, wolf, man, scorpion, dragon, dog god. All right, chapter 22. Ready and wary, Raiden watched as the... Why do we keep switching back and forth every chapter with these stories? Why can't we just fucking focus for 20 goddamn minutes? You know what I'm saying? Is that too much to ask? Is it also too much to ask for me to take a second to take a swig of deal here? Guy gets thirsty, you know? Reading a whole fucking book. Here we go. Chapter 22. I've already forgotten most of these voices. Ready and wary, Raiden watched Goro as the giant's 4 enormous hands opened and shut slowly, menacingly. Several of the fighters scratched at the air. Several of the fingers scratched at the air. Fingers, not fighters. Do not move yet. Oh, this is Goro. I feel like Goro has to be more angry sounding. Do not move yet, Thunder God, Goro said, his voice rumbling. Pointed ears turned slightly forward, fierce red eyes aglow with anticipation. Yes, Shang Tsung said to the Thunder God. Let's savor this moment, why don't we? Our meeting has been a long time coming, though frankly, I wish it could have been postponed a little longer. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Raiden said. You misunderstand, Shang Tsung said. I'm not disappointed at all. It's just that not all of us can simply up and flash here and there as you can. Shao Kahn was annoyed to learn what has happened, and most put out to have to teleport us here. Oh, okay. And most put out to have to teleport us here. As you can imagine, it drains the Lord's energy whenever he has to send his magic through the dimensional barrier. He is not the Lord, Kung Lao protested. Perhaps not yours, not yet, Shang Tsung said as he came a few steps closer to the Thunder God. The light from Raiden's glowing eyes revealed skin that was more wrinkled than ever, eyes that were a bit duller, posture slightly more stooped beneath the weight of his robe. Shang Tsung had about the look and smell of death. It cost me a piece of my soul to enable Shao Kahn to send his power over, the wizard rasped. But the good news... What? Okay. I went to the wrong line. But the good news, Raiden, is that when Goro defeats you and we send your godly soul to the outworld, not only will my soul be entirely restored to me, but Shao Kahn will have enough souls to be able to come through to our realm. Although, his gaze turned flatly from face to face, I'm not entirely sure why he wants this plane of existence. Quality control seems to have slipped somewhat in 1500 years. Kung Lao came forward. Shang, this confrontation need not be. Evil is not the answer. Join with us. Join the Order of Light, Shang Tsung snickered. You've been too long in isolation, priest. Besides, I'm keen to reacquire your soul. Take 2. I'm keen to reacquire my soul. You can do that through us, Kung Lao insisted. Shao Kahn doesn't own it. He merely holds it. We can help you get it back. Shang Tsung bowed slightly at the waist. Thank you, High Priest. But I'd much rather have my soul and help Shao Kahn rule the world. Even you can see, I think, where that would hold some appeal. What the fuck does Raiden sound like? I forgot now. Shao Kahn will destroy you, Raiden said. Sour grapes, Shang Tsung said through pursed lips. But speaking of destroying, Goro, you have some work to do. Yes! The Shokunite bellowed as he bent his head like a charging bull and ran toward Raiden. The Thunder God vanished in a flash of light and reappeared in a burst on the treetop as Goro ran past. Kung Lao is correct, Shang Tsung, Raiden said. Joining him is the only way to save yourself. I almost fucked that up. I wouldn't worry about saving me just now, Shang Tsung said. As the sorcerer spoke, Goro's mighty legs stopped him in his tracks. The brute turned towards Raiden, cocked back his lower right arm, and drove his fist into the mighty tree. The night filled with the crackling sound of the impact, along with the shards of bark and trunk exploding in all directions. Raiden leapt down, landing on Goro's shoulders, and vaulted off again, somersaulting to the top of another tree. With an angry roar, Goro turned, charged the tree, and ran into a lightning bolt Raiden had discharged toward the ground. This is a hilarious fucking... however this is written. Yeah! Goro yelled as he was bounced back, smoke rising from where his bronze flesh had touched the sizzling bolt. There were burned, black patches on his loincloth and red belt. "That was not sporting," Shang Tsung remarked. "Had you used a special move from high ground in Mortal Kombat, you would have been disqualified." Raiden somersaulted from the tree, landed between Goro and Shang Tsung, and held up both hands. "I will stand and fight," he said. "But you must let Take two. "But you must let the mortals go." "But of course," Shang Tsung exclaimed. "That's why I'm here. Had you left them alone, all of this would have been unnecessary." "No," Raiden said. "They must return to the village, not go to the holy mountain." Shang Tsung took a step toward him. "Kung Lao may return to the village. The rest go forward." "No!" Raiden yelled. "Too much talk!" Goro snarled. That sounded like the Hulk, I think. Leaping at Raiden, the savage outworlder managed to wrap all four arms around him before the Thunder God was able to act. Raiden pulled his arms forward and drove his elbows back hard into the giant's side, but Goro didn't seem to feel it. He shifted his lower arms to Raiden's wrist and enclosed the Thunder God's hands within his massive paws. "Try firing bolts now!" The brute laughed as he squeezed Raiden's fist into tiny balls, then executed his rib-crushing chest thump on the Thunder God. As the two otherworldly beings fought, Shang Tsung faced Kung Lao. The wizard held his hands at his sides, palms up, and smoke began to curl from them. "Now, priest, continue on your way, east, toward the mountain." "I will not," Kung Lao said. Beside them, Raiden hooked his feet behind Goro's legs, leaned forward, and drove his head back hard while simultaneously pulling his feet toward him. Goro's head flew back while his legs went forward, dropping him flat on his back. The fall knocked the wind from him, and the unevenness of the terrain caused him to lose his grip on Raiden. The Thunder God was on his feet in an instant and backing away. "You retreat, coward!" Goro said as he scrambled back to his feet. "Not retreating," Raiden said. As soon as Goro was standing, Raiden jumped forward, face down, arms extended before him, legs stretched straight behind him. His fist struck Goro hard in the midsection. The giant bent in half and flew back. Instead of letting him get up, Raiden stood close to his attacker and grabbed him by two of his arms. Grimacing from the weight of the beast, Raiden distributed the load by putting a bended leg in front, another behind, lifting the snarling Goro above his head and throwing him. "Just using a torpedo and What the fuck? "Just using a torpedo and throw combination," said the Thunder God. He would fucking say that? You're telling me he would name his fucking special moves while he's fighting Goro? Quick pause. Where we've started from chapter 19 so far, the quality of the writing has gotten better. It's still not saying much, but it has gotten better. Early on, it seemed like every other sentence had a fuck up in it. More often than not, at this point, I'm the one who's fucking up. Back to business. Goro hit the ground with a crash, sending up a cloud of earth and foliage. But as he fell, his massive right hands landed on one of the fallen trees, hidden in the swirl of soil and leaves. He lifted the shattered tree and swung it outward, catching Raiden in the side and sending him flying. "That, too, wasn't very sporting," Shang Tsung observed. "But you deserved it, Thunder God." Goro was on his feet before Raiden. Charging him, the Shogunite ducked the head blow Raiden tried to throw from his back and pinned him with 3 hands while he tried to pummel him with his 4th. With lightning speed, Raiden ducked and bobbed his head from side to side. Managing to curl his feet under the giant, the Thunder God threw him over his head, causing Kano and Schneider to scatter as the Bronze Beast landed in their midst. "I still can't believe it," Kano said as he and his cohort ran behind a boulder. That's the guy who came to my room! He's got 4 damn arms!" Raiden and Goro both scrambled to their feet and faced each other. Raiden held his right hand edge out, at face level, his left hand fisted and cocked at his side. Goro stood with all 4 arms moving slowly, like a wrestler poised to attack. "I imagine this will take quite some time to complete," Shang Tsung said to Kung Lao. "Time you don't have." By now, the columns of smoke rising from his palms were thick and gray. "Will you take Kano to the amulet?" I kind of made Shang Tsung a little English or Australian there. One of the two. Kung Lao raised his chin. "I will not, Shang Tsung. What my ancestor hid to keep from evil, I will not unearth for evil." The sorcerer smiled as the smoke began to coalesce and assume human form. "Oh yes you will," Shang Tsung said. "The only question is, will you do so willingly?" When he saw the smoke begin to take shape, Raiden coiled his mighty legs to charge. But watchful Goro dove at the Thunder God, catching the head-smaller figure about the waist, spilling him to the ground and holding him there in a tangle of powerful, flailing limbs. "Well done, Goro," Shang Tsung said as he continued to hold his open palms upright. He extended one toward Kung Lao and the other toward Kano. In each there now stood a tiny figure of smoke, one that resembled each man. "Before the eyes of Shao Kahn," he said, "there must be no knee unbended, no will but his. Against the might of Shao Kahn," he continued, bringing his hands nearer, "there can be no resistance." "No!" Raiden shouted as the figures of smoke neared. Through Goro's quartet of arms made it difficult to move. Take 2. Though Goro's quartet of arms made it difficult to move, the Thunder God managed to free his left arm, stretch out splayed hand, and fire a bolt at Shang Tsung. The lightning struck the wizard's hands and sent him tipping back against the boulder where Kano and Schneider had taken refuge. As he fell, he shouted words in Fenga, an arcane form of Cantonese. Even before the flash and explosive rumble had faded, Shang Tsung's laughter could be heard echoing through the plain. "Great and powerful Raiden," the wizard practically shrieked with delight. "Most heroic deity, a god among gods. One who is truly immortal in body and spirit, though sadly wanting in mind. Cretin, that is precisely what I expected you to do. I needed your lightning, needed it to complete my spell." As the darkness returned, an eerie silence fell over the plain. Raiden's eyes went from white to gold as they Take 2. Raiden's eyes went from white to gold as they beheld in the glow of Kung Lao's fallen flashlight what Shang Tsung's magic had wrought. Holy Jesus Christ. Well, it looks like chapter 23 is going to continue this, and we're not going to jump back to fucking Yong Park, aka Scorpion, aka Swing Park, Swee Park, what the fuck ever. I don't know. I think we're going to read this last chapter. It's not the last chapter of the book. What's the last chapter we're going to do? It's chapter 23. And then we'll get the fuck out of here on Mortal Kombat Monday. Are you guys still enjoying this? Do you still want this book to finish? If I power out a couple more, we might be able to finish this book this season. You let me know, okay? We got about 100 pages to go. Good lord. Kung Lao, Raiden said as... This is chapter 23. Raiden said as he looked at the vague shape standing before him. "No, Shang Tsung," said Shang Tsung, with more than a trace of satisfaction. "It is not exactly Kung Lao. What you see would more accurately be called Kano Lao. What the fuck? The smoky humanoid shape looked at its hands. The being had one flame red eye and one normal one. Despite its rippling gray countenance, the face was definitely Kano's, while the wispy, robed form was clearly more Kung Lao than the criminal. "What do you do?" Schneider asked, frozen behind the boulder, mouth agape. "Why," Shang Tsung said, "I simply did some basic mathematics. One mind of Kano, if I may use that term to describe what's in his head, plus one mind of Kung Lao equals one devoted follower of Shang Tsung, with the knowledge of how to find the amulet." The mage looked at Raiden. "Are you pleased with what you've helped create, my impetuous thunder god?" Raiden looked on, his eyes pale gold, expression dolorous. Dolorous? D-O-L-O-R-O-U-S? I've never fucking seen this word in my life. "But wait," Shang Tsung hissed, "there's more. They are smoke, you see, held together by my will. If you try to interfere with them, Raiden, I will allow the smoke to dissipate. When it does, Kano's soul will go straight to the outworld, dragging Kung Lao's with it. Do you know what that means?" Shang Tsung grinned. "It means that Shao Kahn will have enough souls to cross over." "You will let him have them anyway." "Not necessarily," Shang Tsung said. He motioned for Goro to rise, and the brute rose, releasing Raiden. "To tell you the truth, Thunder God, there's a great deal I wish to do before Shao Kahn arrives. You see, I have no illusions about my standing with the Lord. When he crosses over, I'll be just another humble servant in his army of slavish servants." He shrugged. "Oh, I'll be better than the rest of you, who will roast and toast in eternal flame. But I don't want to be anyone's lackey, not even Shao Kahn's. And you stand to benefit as well, Raiden. Do you know how?" Raiden stood. Some of the glow was beginning to return to his eyes as he regarded to the sorcerer. "I won't be so overbearing as to demand..." Take two. "I won't be so overbearing as to demand that you get the amulet for me." Oh, this is still Shang Tsung. Why'd they make it sound like fucking Raiden was about to talk? "I won't be so overbearing as to demand that you get the amulet for me. I know that coming into contact with it will rob you of your godhood, the touch of mere humans having made it impure and all that. And you can take comfort from the fact that by your forbearance, both of them I'm fucking up now, man. Both of the men will be restored when I'm through with them, little worse for having been joined." The sorcerer's bushy white brows arched. "But if you interfere, Raiden, my Kano Kung creation will die. Their souls will go to Shao Kahn, and this world will become one with the outworld. At least this way, I get to carve out my own little kingdom, and you have time to figure out where to hide the monks and priests of the Order of Light before the Lord arrives and orders their eternal damnation." Shang Tsung came closer and looked up into the eyes of the imposing Thunder God. "Yes, I'll allow you to do that, because no one ever..." Take two. "Because one never knows, Raiden. There may come a time when Shao Kahn turns on me, and I'll need allies." Raiden continued to stare at the sorcerer. "I appear to have no choice." "That is correct," said Shang Tsung. "If I do not leave here, do you give me your promise that no harm will come to the monks or priests?" "No harm will befall them," Shang Tsung said. "Nor will I or any of my agents move against your temples or your books and scrolls." The god turned his eyes toward the ghostly gray figure that was once two different men. "Kung Lao, can you hear me?" Shang Tsung said to the shifting figure. "Kano, let him speak." Sorry, I couldn't tell who was supposed to be talking there. Kano's mouth opened wide, then wider, and Kung Lao's head appeared inside of it. Like a newborn baby, the priest appeared head first, shedding Kano's startled visage like a hood. "I hear you, Raiden," said Kung Lao, his voice unheard yet heard, like the sound of reading. What the fuck does that mean? "Go with Kano," said Raiden. "Take him to the amulet." "I will do it," Kung Lao said. As soon as the priest had spoken, Kano's tortured features once again swallowed up those of the priest. While the god and wizard, outworlder, and humans watched, the wraith-like being began to drift across the dark plain, its legs moving but not touching the ground, wide eyes looking ahead but not settling on anything in particular. When the figure was swallowed up by the night, Shang Tsung said, "There is one thing though, Raiden. You did dare to oppose me. Such an impertinence cannot go unpunished." The Thunder God fired a bright white look at the sorcerer. "Does the word of Shang Tsung mean nothing to him?" "Actually, it doesn't," the wizard admitted. "Though I want to retain your good, so... Take two. Though I want to retain your goodwill, so I'll stick by the letter of what I promised. That doesn't mean there will not be retribution outside of the letter, Mr. Wu." Mr. Wu? I don't remember who Mr. Wu is. Is he one of the people who's here? Where the fuck is Sonya? They're all still here, right? Okay, they're in the next paragraph. At the start of the battle between Raiden and Goro, Jim Wu and Sonya had dropped to their bellies in a gully. Gully in a gilly. Gilly in a gully. They were still lying there when Shang Tsung called. "Sir?" Wu said, poking his head over the lip of the ditch. "My demon servant told me you have a radio." What the fuck does Jim Wu sound like? He needs to have a voice. He's gonna be, he's a stereotypical Italian gangster this time. It's a it's a TACSAT telephone, sir, which enables us to communicate via... "Don't trouble me with your gibberish," Shang Tsung said. "Take it out." Jim Wu slid off his backpack and removed the telephone, which was the size of a fat hardback book. He raised a cylinder and pushed a button on the side. A satellite dish unfolded from inside. Wu punched coordinates on a keypad. The dish turned and locked on the satellite, and he scooped up the telephone. "Ready, sir," he said. Shang Tsung's eyes burned. "You have someone on the other end." "Moriarty, sir." "He has someone with him." Under the cover of darkness, Sonya snaked her hand toward the jack that connected the receiver to the dish. "A shepherd, sir," Wu said. Shang Tsung regarded Sonya. "My dear woman, if you move another inch, I will have Goro step on you." Sonya stopped moving. She looked at the implacable? Implacable? I've never seen that word before either. Her eyes imploring. The wizard snickered as he followed her gaze. "And Raiden," the wizard said to the god, "if you are brash enough to try and leave us, Goro will follow you back to the village, whose destruction, I assure you, will be absolute. You must learn, Thunder God, that defiance cannot go entirely unpunished." Shang Tsung's eyes shifted to Wu. "Mr. Wu, raise your accomplice on the other end." His voice is getting hard to do. Wu put the telephone to his mouth. "Moriarty, it's Jim Wu. Are you there?" The voice on the other end answered affirmative. "He's raised," said Wu. Shang Tsung smiled. "Very good. Tell him to turn his gun on the boy and return his modest little soul to Tien." Wow. So Shang Tsung's making people shoot their own partners. Dan's. This was what? 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. This was 5 more chapters of the Mortal Kombat novel by Jeff Rovin. I gotta say, the writing has improved. It's still not great, but it has improved. My reading has not improved, and my voices are all over the fucking place. But this is fun. If you want me to keep going, let me know. This was Mortal Kombat Monday. Next week, we're getting back into Mortal Kombat Deception's Conquest mode. I'm over that horrible side quest that pissed me off last time. We're going to get back to business. What do you think? I love ya. Don't forget to tune in to the History of Halloween Part 4, Retcons and Resurrections, this Friday. I'll see you next week.